Hi, I'm Jeremy Gibbon and I'm a human at JGF.
Ifikile imini enkulu. Welcome to the Humans of JGF, a JGF holiday special highlighting brilliant minds behind our vision. And today we are in Cape Town, Ekapa, and we will be having a chat with our team from this here region. And what a way to start. I mean, I can't imagine another way to start than not to start with our program director, Jeremy Gibbon. Good morning.
Morning, Mutaba. What a pleasure to be here.
How are you?
Yes, good. It's a beautiful day in Cape Town and looking forward to this conversation.
So I'm looking through my questions and I'm just like, oh no, I'm not just interviewing a team member today. I'm interviewing one of the founding members of what we understand as JGF Fellowship. Before we get to the meat of your history in the organization, do tell us, where are you from? Very loaded question for many people in this here country. But do tell us.
Oh dear, where am I from? So I was born and grew up about 10 minutes down the road, I guess. I was born in the Mowbray Maternity Hospital and grew up in the Pinelands area, was schooled at Westerford in Newlands, attended UCT. So a lot of my early years and my growing up years were right here in Cape Town.
Yeah.
So just down the road.
Lovely stuff. So, program director, at face value, people can make the assumptions of what it is that you do. Do give us a glimpse of what it is you actually do. What does this job entail?
It's such a good question. Oh dear, and I don't know. I don't have a terribly good answer to it. I have a job description that I could pull out somewhere that it tells me what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
What I actually end up doing doesn't always align terribly well. You know, I'm not a big one for job titles, I have to confess. I kind of feel like we know what we have to do and we need to get on and do it.
Yeah.
Obviously, the bigger we get, the more people are involved, the more we need to be clear. But I love that kind of early stage development. When Julian and I were doing some of the very early work, we had quite a lot of discussions about role and at that point, the particular job titles didn't really mean a lot. We just had work to do, and Colin and Paul came on as the first program officers, and the four of us really just kind of looked at the job that needed to be done and just kind of divvied it up. And so, I mean, I guess at a kind of high-level program director looks after the programs and in particularly kind of strategically how the programs are put together, how they're delivered, how they're assessed. I think, and I love that. I love that process of developing program. I found it really creative to try and look at what other organizations were doing. Allingo Orbis Foundation were a big partner in the early days, and we learned a huge amount from them. And so we'd often model on what they were doing, on what we had experienced, what I had experienced and thought was relevant, and then bringing those bits together. And then slowly bringing in kind of additional experts to add, richness and fullness and value to the program. Nowadays, what I do, I keep a light kind of touch on the overall program, but we've got such experts and such great teams leading at different parts that part of the job is not a big part. So really we spend a lot more time thinking strategically about how best to influence, how to connect, collaborating with other groups, really starting to look at the theory of change and how we start to amplify impact. And that requires collaboration with other groups, understanding who's working in the space. So I'm finding myself being drawn more into the strategic side of things, which I love and enjoy, and look at future developments. What are the kind of programs we can develop from here?
Oh, lovely. As a teaching fellowship, it would be remiss of us not to teleport ourselves to our individual classroom experiences. And I will pose you this, Jeremy. Take us to your earliest memory of being young Jeremy at school?
Earliest memory. I think as I get older, my earlier memories fade more and more. I guess my earliest memory is kind of a very playful preschool kind of memory, kind of mud and dust and plastic motorbikes and things like that. I guess my kind of earliest formal memory is learning to read. Funny enough, in what was Standard 1. Sub A, grade 1. Yeah.
Yes.
So kind of sitting on the mat with a particular teacher with little flashcards and that kind of memory. Not wildly excited about school, I have to confess. I mean, my best memories are, I suppose, out on the sports field, playing at break, playing sport after school. That was very much where I found my space and my happiness, the kind of physical engagement and fun with each other. And I guess the social side of it. I think the academic side of schooling came relatively easily to me for what it was worth, and in the nature that we were engaging with it. So it wasn't a big part of my kind of thinking and development. That only came on much later when I started to really get into particular subject disciplines that I felt engaging.
Do you remember the books that you were engaging?
Oh no, man! You mean in those early days?
Yeah, I still remember Kathy and Mark.
Oh dear,
front to back.
No, I don't. I remember that they were terribly boring and simplistic stories. I mean that, which was entirely appropriate at the stage. And I don't want to pretend I was some kind of magnificent reader. I wasn't, but I remember thinking at the time, man, there's not much going on. It was.
Give me art. Give me development.
So no, it was like one or two characters and possibly a dog and a mat, and they sat on the mat with the cat, and I was like, oh man, surely there must be something more here. Which of course we got to in time, but not a lot to start with.
You have memories of being in the sports field, and you are rather active now as well. If there's anyone who's consistent with being on the bike, so at the office we have a thing called weekly priorities, 3 professional priorities and a personal one. 9 times out of 10, Jeremy is on some ride 3 times a week. Walk, more riding than walking. So at school, what kind of sports did you take to?
I was good at sport. I could catch a ball and throw a ball and kick a ball and stuff like that. So it was a space where I excelled and found acceptance. It was a great place to meet people and get to know people, and so I really enjoyed that part of it. And I was good enough to be in A teams and whatever. So there was positive reinforcement for who I was and what I was doing. So it was traditional sports, rugby, cricket. I played a little bit of tennis, stuff like that. I could run quite fast and I could jump, so some athletics. But it was actually only when I left school and at university started playing volleyball that I really kind of found a sport that I was really good at. I could really jump, and for whatever reason, I managed to be able to play volleyball quite well. So I played indoor and beach volleyball, and loved it. I had a number of years playing on. It was just the time that we were starting a beach circuit here in South Africa, so there was a little bit of. Well, the first tournament we played, you won a pair of shorts. That was the first prize.
Love it.
And then with some sponsors came in, and then it became reasonably lucrative, and you could earn enough money to have a pretty good summer holiday and a little bit spare for the rest of the year. So volleyball is great. Physical degradation as you get older. I blew my knee out quite early on playing rugby, so I've had dodgy knees for a while. So trying to find sports that are good with that.
Kind to the knees.
Yeah. I really got into snow sports when I was overseas in the UK, and so skiing and snowboarding are probably my passions. But on a regular basis, mountain bike riding, and so I'm up on the mountain 3 or 4 times a week, which is great.
We know that too
which is lovely.
So describe to us, what kind of learner were you in high school?
I was a very boring compliant learner. I really was. Yeah.
Is compliant a euphemistic way of saying you were teacher's pet as well?
I don't think I cared enough to actually be a teacher's pet, but goodness. I quite liked kind of decoding what was needed to be successful. That's a bit dramatic, I think. Yeah, but, I can put that lens on it now. At the time, I liked getting good marks. I liked doing well. And actually, I realized quite quickly that doing well at school is not, it relies on a few kind of quite basic things. You have to have a basic understanding. You have to make sure that you know what the outcomes are that are required, and you need to understand assessments. And for whatever bizarre set of reasons, I could just work out generally, what was needed. Yeah. And I was able to do that. So I got pretty good marks, and I got on well with teachers. I wasn't a great student. I don't think I really got into the depths of learning until I got to university and probably even post-university into my teacher qualifications and started really thinking about teaching and learning. That's probably the point at which I most deeply got into real proper learning and academic studies. So, my teachers would tell me I'm a good student and I would generally get good marks, except history. History was my bugbear.
Favorite subject.
And I loved history. I really enjoyed it and I found it stimulating. Yeah. I just could not crack how to write essays in a way that would get me an A. So I never quite managed to get an A for history, and I wasn't great at languages either. Afrikaans was always a tough one for me. But anyway, so I was a good student. I kind of got along and worked out how it all worked. So it was okay.
And who was your favorite teacher?
Yeah, that's obviously a question we've kind of come to ask a lot at JGF. So it's caused me to think quite a lot about a variety of different teachers. And, favorite doesn't always mean best. Yes. I had a great science teacher, John Broster. I'm still in contact with John, and he was very influential in my life and probably played quite a big role in me becoming a teacher, and the way in which I ended up teaching science probably, was significantly impacted by him. So he's in a sense an obvious choice. I had a great English and history teacher, James Bissett, who was really challenging and made me think, beyond the comfort zone. I had a grade 9 English teacher, Claudia Regnart, who went on to write textbooks and was one of those really challenging teachers. She made us do things and think in ways that we hadn't before. I had a doyen of a maths teacher, Shirley Fitton, who wrote all the textbooks at the time, and she was just a legendary maths teacher, and at the time, I don't think we appreciated how good she was. And in retrospect, we were like, man, she was really, really good. So I was blessed to have a range of really good teachers. And some were favorites, enjoyed it at the moment. Some in retrospect. I did woodwork as a subject. Yeah. And in those days, it was you had higher grade and standard grade subjects, and if you did more higher grade subjects, then you had a advantage with your overall aggregates, and that was a big thing. And woodwork was only offered at standard grade, so it was quite a big deal for someone who was quite academic to take woodwork. But I just loved it. It gave me a different mode of operating and thinking and being during the school day. Yeah. And my teacher, Alistair Mather, he was a very strict teacher. I mean, and you had to be at that time. But a brilliant teacher. And I remember probably 10 years later bumping into him and just saying, thank you for what you did. You were an amazing teacher. I didn't appreciate it at the time, but in retrospect, I can just, you gave me a love for a subject and a way of thinking about a subject that was deep. So, yeah, a lot of good teachers in my life.
So we often hear about the founding members of JGF and we being the internal team, and we think of these people as the supreme four, really the founding members.
I don't know about that.
So I just want to know, though, the story behind the formation of JGF? Was there a call? Hey, Jeremy, would love for you to do ABCD. And what were you doing at the time when you got the call? So take us through that.
Sure. So I was principal of Pinelands High School, and I had been there for 5 years. Being principal is a tough job, a very tough job. And I'd been at it for a while, and I was sensing I needed something different, either to move to a new school, a new opportunity. And my wife had been working part-time. We had 3 young kids, and she had an opportunity to move full-time with a particular fintech company she was working with. And it felt like a good time for me to move out of, very formalized, organizationally based work to something more flexible. And I'd always wanted to study further. I've got this love-hate relationship with academic study. I love it as I start. And then it becomes too theoretical for me and I get antsy. Then I need to get back into the classroom or into contact with people. And so it kind of comes and goes. And I'd done my master's and really enjoyed it. And I'd always thought I wanted to do a PhD. So I stopped at Pinelands and started a PhD. But there were some difficulties with my supervisor and the timing and things like that. So I actually I started a small consultancy to just get some regular work in and bring in some income while I did some field work for my PhD. And my
curious.
Yes.
PhD. What was your research topic?
Yeah. So my research was around online learning, which at that time was quite sexy and vogue. And nowadays it's like, whatever.
Super edgy.
Well, yeah, a little while ago. So I'd started using some flipped classroom techniques. We were using some learning management system materials, and I was particularly interested in the changing role of the teacher as technology becomes more and more part of the classroom life, and so it was around the agency of a teacher in particularly flipped classroom, and I was particularly interested in the nature of the materials, the digital assets that students were using. My contention then and remains now is that generally they're quite poor and low quality, and the focus tends to be on the administration of online learning and the access rather than the quality. And so when I looked at much of what students were engaging with, it was terrible. It was boring. It was awful. It was just text behind screen or narrated PowerPoints. And I thought, we must do better than this. At the time, there was a lot of talk about the MTV generation. Students were engaging with high quality online material. And then when they came to school, they were expected just to, engage with boring materials. And I was like, no, that's not good enough. So that was what I set out to do. I developed some of my own materials. I thought they were pretty good and edgy. In retrospect, I'm not sure that they were. And I wanted to test them. I linked with some schools and I was doing some field testing. So that's kind of how it started. And I then linked up with a media company who are doing really cool online material. They were doing online magazines and video content. And they were doing a lot of the content for the big sports brands, the Stormers, the Springbok rugby team, SA Netball, football, all of those kinds of things. And when I looked at their material, I was like, man,
this is it, yeah.
I want organic chemistry to look like that. Sure. I want my rates of reaction module to look like that. So I partnered with them to develop their LMS. And we did some really cool work together for a while. And I was doing some other consulting. And Anthony Farr, who was at the time CEO of Alan Gray Orbis Foundation, was a friend of mine, and we had been engaging around education. And while he was working in the foundation and Julian was part of the work that was going on there, they were looking for ways for the endowment to get involved in education. And they'd gone through a number of different thoughts, and one of those thoughts was kind of online education, digital assets, etc. So we'd had a number of conversations about that. And then as the endowment moved more towards replicating the pipeline of talent approach that the foundation was using and looking at pointing that in an education space, Anton, the endowment, asked if I would come on board just to do some initial scoping work, some stakeholder mapping, and pull together a business plan. And at that point, Julian and I started working together, and he had the experience of the model that the foundation had used in terms of talent development through this pipeline model, and I had the educational background, and together we slowly crafted the business plan of what JGF would be. And then eventually presented that to the Board of Trustees for the endowment, and they thankfully passed it, and then invited the two of us to start it. And by that stage, the PhD had kind of been pushed out to the side because this other work was just so exciting. And so that's how it all kind of kicked off.
Oh, lovely, lovely. And now we're going to talk about the various faces and phases of your trajectory, because we just meet you now as Jeremy, program director, but before Jeremy was even principal, you were an aspiring teacher. And what inspired you to be a teacher?
Yeah, it's a good question. We were joking earlier that I come from a family of teachers, and many people do. You know, it's not an unknown phenomenon. And so my father was a teacher and a principal, and a very well-known principal, and very well-respected principal. And I'm one of four in our family. And my two older siblings both became teachers. And so by the time it got to me, you know, my parents... there really was no pressure to become a teacher. If anything, it was like, how about something else? Possibly, how about something like medicine was a trendy thing. I had good marks. I suspect I possibly at that time could have got into medicine. And as hard as I tried, nothing else really kind of fitted. So I did a general BSc in maths and chemistry and physics for my undergrad. So it kind of left things open, but... I don't know. It was in my blood. I loved being around teenagers. I loved the energy. I loved being involved in teaching, learning environments. I had a general kind of knack of working with that age of students. I got on well with them. I was able to engage, and just felt drawn into that space. So I did the equivalent of a PGCE. It was an HDE at the time, and then got into my first job and just loved it. Just absolutely loved it. It touched all the things that I felt passionate about and that brought me life, and felt like was able to make contribution. There was deep meaning in the work that I was doing. So. There's a lot of talk about, teaching such a difficult career and such a this career. And I'm not by any way underplaying those aspects. It is. It's really hard. It's really difficult. It's really challenging. And you don't make a huge amount of money. But, man, on the other side, it is deeply, deeply enjoyable, rewarding, meaningful, in a way that, I think in retrospect, I possibly took for granted at the time. But, with time realized you're working hard day in, day out with people, with a team dedicated towards the growth of people in a way that has deep meaning in many circumstances. So, that's how I got into it. And I think if I had it all again, besides becoming a ski instructor, which I think in a parallel life I would love to have been, but that probably wouldn't have had the meaning. I think I'd just do it all again, to be honest. Yeah.
Can you recall your first experience of working with young people that really just shifted your perspective around purpose and meaning for you?
I don't think that there was a specific moment. I'd grown up. I grew up in the church that had a very active kind of youth ministry, and so from quite an early age I was involved in a variety of different kind of youth leadership type activities, which put me in a position of leading and working with young people. And through university that continued. I tutored, I coached, I did all those kind of things. And so it wasn't necessarily a single moment. It was a place that I felt comfortable, that I felt engaged. It felt like a meaningful place. Possibly the kind of first year of teaching was more a reality check. It's like, wow, this is actually hard. This is not just get on with a group of young people and teach them something along the way. There was a lot to think about and reflect on. classroom management, dealing with young people, understanding boundaries, motivating and rewarding, all those kind of issues, were hard. So not a single moment. I think just kind of a growing acceptance that this was the place where I was going to work.
I'm so excited to ask the next question because your lens in particular I would find very interesting. So this question is, what surprises you the most about working at JGF? Now, you were part of the founding members. When you step back and you see this team that you've played a part in curating, the kind of quality of human beings first, their expertise, just looking at the kind of people who have lent their voices and experiences here, what sticks out the most?
Possibly the biggest initial thing is that I'm constantly amazed we get paid to do the work we do. I just love the work we do. So much of what we get to do, I've always wanted to do in previous jobs and roles and existences, but there's never any money to do it. So you kind of bootstrapped it, and you did a little bit on the side, and you did it over the weekends for free or for minimal. And so to be working in an organization where there are resources to do the incredible work of identifying future teachers and leaders and nurturing them, I'm just blown away. I hope those higher up don't hear this, but I mean, I possibly would do this work for free. It's just like, it's incredible to be involved in that space. So that's one thing. And many friends and colleagues who are working in more formal educational systems, schools, universities, teacher training colleges, et cetera, are amazed that we get to do the stuff we do on a regular basis. So that's at a high level. At a team level, I'm not amazed. I celebrate and delight in the diversity of the team and the diversity of the background experiences, cultures, language, lived experience, and how rich that is in bringing together the work that we do. And I think through my career, I've always had a theoretical appreciation of the joy and the richness of diversity, but I don't think I've ever had such a full experience of that as we currently have it at JGF. Just across every metric that you can possibly think of, and the way in which that brings depth to the nuance of what we do. Many colleagues comment on how deeply we think about what we do, and we think regularly and a lot. And if we don't think and we just do something afterwards, we're like, let's just, there's a lot of reflecting. Why do we do something? How do we do it better? How can we be more inclusive? How can we be more targeted? And having such a rich, diverse team really it takes that to a different dimension, A lot of people who look in from the outside at what we do are like, wow, you're really thoughtful. Why do you do that? And the answer to why is a long answer. There's a lot to say. And I guess that I hadn't anticipated that when we started. But very quickly realized, wow, this is going to be a rich experience working with such a diverse range of people. So that's probably the hallmark, I think, from my side. I tell other people what we do and what, the kinds of discussions we have, and they just, most of my friends and colleagues are just amazed at the richness and the depth and the diversity of what we're able to do, and so that for me is a big hallmark.
We often say, I mean me, to be honest, often say that
you go right ahead.
Our CFs are our North Star. They are the reason why we do the kind of work that we do, obviously. And what about our CFs, in your view, Jeremy, reassures you that South African classrooms are in safe hands?
That's a hard and provocative question, because I don't think that our classrooms are in safe hands at the moment. I really don't. I think, and that's not through the fault of those people who are there. It's through the fault of a much broader system.
Yeah.
If I didn't live a privileged existence with access to, the upper end of our education system, I would be, I don't know, I would be distraught. I'd be terrified. I would start my own school. I would, whatever it would be, because generally our kids are not at the moment. And which is why we do the work we do.
Yeah.
And there are complex reasons for that, and by and large, it's not the fault of the people there, it's the fault of the system that has ended up with the particular structure and the way in which our classrooms and our education system are set up. And that there's a whole conversation to be had there. Our focus is more often on, well, what's the solution to many of these problems? And the solutions come at multiple in multiple ways, and one of the biggest ones is who's the person that's leading the learning in that classroom, the teacher, and how well equipped are they? And so that's why we spend the money we do and do the work that we do, and I believe passionately that teachers are the units of change in our education system.
Yeah.
And we manage to attract, select, identify, and nurture the most incredible teachers. I mean, it's extraordinary. And
honestly,
every time I see them, I mean, we didn't start JGF for this reason, but my son is being taught by 2 JGF fellows at the moment. And I listen to what he says. And, it shouldn't necessarily be like that, because, there are lots of really good teachers. But these 2 are amazing teachers. And I listen to them. I get feedback from them. I'm now a parent watching my child. And that's really what I want for every parent and their child right across this country.
Yeah.
To be able to listen to the stories that come back from school through the eyes of their children and think, wow, that's cool. That's amazing. What a great learning or whatever it might be. So I think, to get back to your question, the fellows that we managed to bring onto this program and we have the joy and privilege of walking alongside are incredible young people, and they'll be amazing teachers. And I have no doubt that they'll go on to make incredible impact. But they're 60 a year. And our theory of change doesn't rest on having a large number of teachers. It rests on identifying innovators and leaders and change makers to bring about future change.
Yeah.
And so it's a challenging one, I believe in each one of those people. I have no doubt, listening to their stories, that they will innovate and lead change, and that they will make things better. I wish we could do it quicker. I wish our theory of change rested on, in the next couple of years, having amazing teachers across all schools. But that's harder to do. So, tough question, because there's a lot in that isn't easy.
Answered like a true strategist. Like a true strategist. Every angle unpacked. So now we are going to end our conversation this morning. But before we do, Samora Menze is going to be recorded after you. What are some of the fondest memories with or of Sam that you'd love to share with us?
Oh, well, I mean, most people at JGF probably don't know the kind of backstory, because the teacher that I mentioned, one of my favorite teachers, John Broster.
Yeah.
Sam had been teaching at a particular school, and John got hold of me and said, "Listen." And John had been mentoring Sam for for a number of years, and John phoned me up and said, "Listen, I've got this friend who I'd love you to chat with." And so I met Sam, I don't know how many years ago now, 5, 6, 7 years ago, in a whole nother life. He was a teacher, and we chatted through a number of issues. We had quite a few things in common, and we saw each other a couple of times. I don't think there was any kind of detailed mentoring relationship, but we were able to check in and bounce off. And I remember when I met him for the first time, I think I just started working with JGF, and I thought to myself, this is the kind of person I would love to have in JGF. And I may have mentioned it to Sam, and but there, we weren't hiring, and this went on. I saw Sam one or two more times, and then. And then a position became available, and Sam applied. And there was at the time when we had a huge application, and I think there was only one position, and Sam didn't get that particular position. And it was quite a hard discussion. I'd got to know Sam, and I told him about JGF, and he continued teaching in different environments, and then we were hiring again, and Sam applied again and then got the role. And so I was just so excited. I'd known Sam's background. I knew what a great teacher he was. I knew how well he engaged with young people. I knew what a great kind of lived experience he came in with, and I just thought, man, Sam would just be so good with JGF. And so when he came and then got to work with him as a colleague and really experience his love of life and his laugh. Sam's laugh is the thing that kind of, for me, defines Sam. I can hear it coming down the corridor when we're in the office, and he just has that lovely smile and that deep laugh that just reflects the warmth and generosity of spirit and depth that he brings. So I'm sure you're going to have a great conversation with him. He's got an incredible story to tell, and I look forward to listening to it when these come out later on.
And this is all embodied by candidate fellows referring to him as Uncle Sam.
Uncle Sam, yes.
So that
Uncle
really holds
Sam,
everything
absolutely.
together. Jeremy Nkosi kakhulu for your time today. Thank you so much for your willingness to share your wealth and depth of experience. It's not every day, as I'm speaking to you now, it's not every day that, and I'll use bureaucratic terms here, where an employee gets to just have a conversation with a member of exec at a very chilled level, for lack of a better word, and just hearing your experience and also just feeling your passion. Sometimes the passion can be lost in the everyday mechanics of doing this, approving that. I'm really, really grateful for this time, and thank you so much also for the space that you and exec create for divergent thinkers such as myself and most team members. Sometimes I feel like you leave us in a lab and you trust us with dangerous chemicals. I'm like, oh, you sure you want to do this? And you give us space and room to do that. And it is through your faith, your trust, and the space that you give us to do the work that we're able to thrive and create the kind of impact that we hope to create for our candidate fellow and for the organization at large. So, sabulela kakhulu.
Thanks, Matabo. It's been fun.
Okay, lovely. Betunani, as you know, the conversation continues on all of our social media networks. You just need to go to Google, and when you get there, type in Jake's Chavo Fellowship, and you will see a beautifully created website, and everything that you need to know about us is on said website. You can partner with us in the great work that we do. We'd love to extend community that is centered around making sure, as Jeremy so beautifully put, that every child in this country goes home and to tell a story to a parent about a wonderful high impact teacher. We can make this happen. So from me, Mata Wutadi, I'll see you on the next episode. Cheers.